They say the sun burns hotter over Red Hollow, that it scorches the land, so clean even snakes have to blink. Dust rides the wind like smoke, and if you listen close, it carries whispers of things long buried, men, beasts, and the stories in between. There's one tale in particular, told often but never quite the same way, about a farmer who came to the edge of the world with a beast that didn't belong. The farmer's name was Jebediah Cross, a man built like the land itself, dry, silent, and full of scars. Folks didn't know where he came from exactly, only that he settled alone at the far end of the valley, near the cliffs where the sun dipped red into the rocks. His house was crooked and small, patched with salvage boards and adobe, and his fields grew odd fruits, dates and desert figs, things that shouldn't have survived out there but did under his care. But it wasn't the crops that drew eyes. It was the animal. He called it Mahmoud, a towering, awkward creature with a humped back, long legs, and eyes like polished stones. A camel. A real one. Not a mule with mange or a trick of the heat. The kind folks had only seen in dime novels or Bible paintings. Some said he brought it back from war. Others claimed it wandered in from a circus. Whatever the truth, Mahmoud moved through town with slow, noble grace, tethered to Jeb's side like a sentinel. Children followed them in awe. Grown men whispered about curses and foreign blood. Jeb said nothing. He never said much at all. He'd buy salt, mail a letter, sometimes leave a pouch of strange seeds on the counter. Then he'd ride back out, his silhouette swallowed by heat shimmer and canyon wind. In Dry Tree Junction, stories travel faster than wagons, and men who are strange and quiet don't stay safe for long. The Goro brothers were four mouths with too many teeth between them, sons of a failed preacher and a saloon girl who once tried to baptize a rattlesnake. Clay, the eldest, had ideas, mean ones, fast ones. He heard about the camel from a drunk prospector and laughed until his face went red. Ain't no man needs a thing like that unless he's hiding gold in its belly, he told his brothers, spitting tobacco juice onto the floor. We'll pay the old farmer a visit. Make an offer. If he don't like it, we take it anyway. So one evening, just as the sun fell behind the cliffs and cast everything in iron orange, they rode out, for shadows on horseback, smelling of sweat, cheap whiskey, and easy cruelty. Jeb was kneeling by the irrigation ditch, hands in the soil, when he heard hooves. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply stood, wiped his palms on his trousers, and waited. Mahmoud let out a grunt, low and thunder deep, as if sensing what was coming before it arrived. The Goros pulled up in a storm of dust, their horses snorting, restless. "Evening, old man," Clay called out, grinning beneath a grease-dark mustache. "Heard you keeping something mighty exotic out here." Jeb said nothing. Clay slid off his horse, spurs jangling. He approached the camel slowly, squinting up at it like a man studying a painting he couldn't read. "Now that's a prize. You know what a creature like this could fetch in California? Hell, even Mexico. Maybe I'll start my own damn zoo." Mahmoud didn't move, but his gaze didn't waver. Clay turned back to Jeb. "How much, old man? Name your price." Jeb crossed his arms. "He's not for sale." "See, that ain't the answer I like." Clay's tone soured quick, like milk left too long in the sun. "Makes me think you don't understand how this works. You got something worth talking. We take it." One of the brothers dismounted and grabbed a torch from his saddlebag. Another dismounted with rope in hand. Jeb took a step forward. "He's mine. He stays." Clay didn't reply. He just nodded. The torch flared to life. They came at once, two seizing Mahmoud's reins, one circling to flank Jeb. He fought like a man who'd fought before, landing an elbow into one jaw and throwing a rock at another, but he was outnumbered. They kicked him to the dirt, cracked a rifle across his back, and left him coughing dust. Mahmoud screamed, a sound that didn't belong in those canyons. It echoed like a horn from some distant age. The camel struggled, kicked, spat, but they bound his legs and let him off like a stolen prize. Before they left, Clay crouched beside Jeb. "You should have taken the deal," he said, flicking his still-burning match into the dry brush near the fields. Jeb lay there long after the hoofbeats vanished, after the fire crackled through the edge of his crops, after the smoke drifted into the reddening sky. He did not cry. He did not curse. He stood, slow as the sun rising, walked back to the house, and fetched a rusted bucket. One by one, he doused the flames. His movements were deliberate, almost tender, like he'd done this before, like he'd buried worse things. When the fire died and the stars rose, he sat on the porch beside a broken beam and stared out into the black. His hands trembled once, then were still. Somewhere beyond the cliffs, the Gorals laughed around a fire, thinking they'd taken from a man too old to matter. But Red Hollow remembers, and the wind that night didn't just carry the scent of smoke. It carried a promise. By morning, the smoke had thinned to a sour line against the pale horizon. The date palms were charred to brittle stalks, the fig trees scorched to bone-white trunks. What had once been a stubborn little patch of green in a dying land now looked as broken as the man who owned it. Jebediah Cross moved among the ashes like a preacher in a ruined church. He didn't weep, didn't curse the sky. He only moved, stacking what hadn't burned, shoveling out what had. His body ached with every bend of the spine, ribs bruised, shoulder torn where a boot had slammed him into the earth. But pain was a language he'd long since learned to speak, without making a sound. He passed the spot where Mahmoud had last stood tethered. The post remained, half pulled from the ground, rope frayed and swinging loose like a forgotten noose. He knelt beside it, brushing his hand across the dirt. The hoof prints told a story, erratic, deep. Mahmoud had resisted, fought, right up until they dragged him off into the dark. A long time ago, that camel had belonged to someone else. Not the army, not the Gorals, not even Jeb. She had been called Layla, an interpreter with eyes like storm clouds and hands that moved as fast as her tongue. Jeb had met her outside Tucson during the tail end of an experiment gone sideways, when the U.S. Camel Corps still thought it could civilize the deserts with beasts from foreign lands. She'd arrived with them, hired on from Cairo, guiding both men and animals across terrain neither truly understood. When the Corps was disbanded and the beasts were sold or released, she stayed with Jeb, who knew the silence of sand better than the noise of cities. They farmed together, laughed in languages only the wind overheard, and raised Mahmoud from a stubborn adolescent into something more than a beast, more than memory. When she passed, fever, sudden and cruel, Jeb buried her under the olive tree that had never borne fruit. Mahmoud stood beside the grave and didn't move for 3 days. Since then, man and beast had lived like two halves of the same scar, and now one half was missing. Jeb went inside. The house smelled of smoke and dust, a silence pressed into every board. He opened the trapdoor beneath the floorboards with the reverence of a priest lifting a shroud. From the hollow came a bundle wrapped in worn oilcloth. He placed it on the table, unrolled it slow. Inside, a curved cavalry saber, worn smooth at the hilt. A Henry rifle, patched but functional. A handful of cartridges. And beneath them, folded in cloth, a necklace strung with coins, Egyptian, Moroccan, Turkish. Tokens from another life. Jeb didn't speak. He didn't need to. By dusk, the homestead sat empty. He left a single candle burning on the porch, a silent marker for what had been. He rode a weather-bitten mule named Josie, packed light, carried only what the hunt required. The tracks were still fresh, 4 horses, heavy load, heading northeast into the spine of the Blackroot Canyons. He didn't take the trail most traveled. Instead, he skirted the edge of the valley, following arroyos and dry riverbeds, places only remembered by the land. He studied droppings, water breaks, broken twigs. He moved like he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. And maybe he had. The Gorals were not subtle men. They left cigar stubs, bent nails, rusted tins. A man who tracked Confederate riders through Mexican wastelands knew how to read those signs like scripture. At the edge of Dead Mule Pass, he stopped beneath an outcrop and waited. A small fire burned low below the ridge, voices drifting up, loud and careless. He removed his hat, sat cross-legged in the sand, and watched. 4 men, 1 beast. Mahmoud was tied awkwardly to a mesquite tree, legs bound tight. He shifted uneasily, still resisting. The brothers cursed him, threw stones when he bucked. Clay Goro laughed loudest, bragging about his future zoo. his gold to come. He didn't see the slow hand of justice threading its way through the canyons. Jeb didn't move that night. He sat still while scorpions crept across his boots, while coyotes howled to the moon. He watched and waited, the kind of waiting only known by men who'd buried more than they'd built. Come morning, he moved again, silent as wind over stone. He wasn't looking to kill. Not yet. But there were debts to tally, and he knew how to make a man feel the pressure of an invisible noose tightening inch by inch. He'd follow them longer. Let the brothers grow lazy, cocky, split up to scout. He'd choose his moment. And when it came, it would come fast. The land remembers. So does the man. And somewhere behind the next ridge, Mahmoud waited. The Blackroot Canyons were older than any man who'd ever wandered them, cut into the earth like deep scars made by the gods themselves. Wind howled through their narrow throats like distant cries, and sunlight fell only in pieces, slicing the rock walls into bands of gold and black. They say the canyons remember every footfall, every gunshot, every broken promise left to rot in the dust. And that week, they remembered the return of a man most had already counted among the dead. Jebediah Cross moved through the gulches like a shadow long since loosed from its man. His hat was pulled low, rifle strapped across his back, blade tied to his thigh with a piece of torn saddle leather. He'd tracked the Goros for 2 days, watching them argue, drink, strike each other over bad dice and stolen meat. He saw Clay lose patience with his youngest brother, Amos, and punch him so hard his lips split wide open. He saw Mahmoud spit in Clay's face when the brute tried to mount him. The camel hadn't broken, not once. His long legs trembled but held firm, even under hunger and rope burn. Clay finally got wise and started splitting the camp, sending one brother up ahead to scout, another to look for water. He didn't know that every time they did, Jeb was there, watching, leaving small signs, a twisted branch here, a horseshoe turned backward in the trail. Ancient tricks meant to shake the nerves of men too mean to be smart. And sure enough, it worked. On the 4th day, the middle brother, Rule, rode ahead to survey a passage near Widow's Arch, a stretch of canyon where the walls closed in so tight not even a wagon axle could pass without scraping. Jeb was waiting for him, crouched in the shade of a petrified log, rifle leveled. He didn't kill him. Not yet. Rule rounded the bend, humming a tune. Rein slack. The rifle cracked once. The bullet caught his saddle horn, and the horse bucked, screaming, tossing Rule into the rock wall. Before he could scramble up, Jeb was there, calm, ghost quiet. Next time, I aim lower, Jeb said. Rule's breath hitched. His eyes darted to the empty trail behind. I didn't mean nothing personal, old man. Just doing what Clay said. Jeb nodded slowly, as if accepting the words. Then he picked up Rule's drop canteen and poured the water out onto the dust. No more excuses, Jeb said. You stole something sacred. Please, Jeb struck him once across the jaw with the butt of the rifle, then left him tied to a boulder with a note pinned to his vest. The land remembers. So do I. By dusk, Clay found him there, dazed and bleeding. He read the note, crumpled it in his fist, and spit hard into the wind. His face went dark, something deeper than rage, something closer to fear. He's hunting us, Amos muttered. He's one man, Clay barked, though his hand shook as he relit his cigar. One old man with a damn camel. But even as he said it, he knew. This wasn't about an animal anymore. It wasn't even about pride. It was about something Clay didn't understand, something that walked out of the past wrapped in silence and patience, something that didn't stop once it started moving. The brothers tried to press on, heading deeper into the canyons toward an old trail that led to Sable Bluff. But every path they took bent back on itself. Every dry spring they searched came up cracked and lifeless. It was as if the land itself was folding in, boxing them tighter with every hour. The second ambush came the next day. Amos was sent to fetch water from a trickling seep behind a curtain of vine. He never made it back. When Clay found the spot, the vines were torn, the water muddied with blood, and a message carved into the stone in Arabic. Words Clay couldn't read, but the meaning was clear. Mahmoud stood a little straighter that night, still roped but proud, unbroken. Clay threw a rock at him and missed. The camel didn't flinch. "You ain't no beast," Clay muttered. "You're a damn omen." The next morning, they found the trail blocked. Rocks had fallen across the narrow pass. A landslide, maybe, or something made to look like one. Clay was down to one brother, half a canteen of water, and the steady thump of guilt pressing at his chest like the echo of a war drum. He had begun to talk to himself. Not words. Chants. Bits of sermons his father used to shout when the liquor had its claws in him. Jeb waited until nightfall. He moved in silence, knife drawn, feet steady on the rocks. He bypassed the mule guards, the makeshift traps of tied pans and dangling bells. He found Mahmoud first. The camel's eyes met his in the dark, and for a moment, just a breath, they stood as equals, two survivors tethered to a promise. Jeb knelt and cut the ropes. Mahmoud didn't bolt. He leaned in, pressed his massive head to the old man's shoulder. "Let's end this," Jeb whispered. Then he moved toward the firelight. Clay sat beside a dwindling flame, muttering over the Henry rifle he'd taken from Jeb's own homestead. His last brother, Rule, lay passed out under the stars, too far gone to help. Jeb stepped into the ring of light and let the fire catch his face. Clay rose, rifle swinging up. "Drop it," Jeb said. Clay hesitated, then fired. The shot rang wide, panic in the aim. Jeb's saber flashed out of the dark, catching Clay's wrist, spinning the rifle from his grip. The two men locked, grunting like animals, fists thudding, teeth snapping, old strength clashing with wild fear. Clay drew a knife. Jeb twisted his arm until it cracked. Clay screamed. "You don't understand what you stole," Jeb growled, pinning him to the ground. "He ain't just mine. He's all that's left." Clay spat in his face, and that's when Mahmoud stepped forward, towering above them, shadow blotting out the moon. With one swift kick, he sent Clay sprawling into the rocks, unconscious. The fight was over. Jeb stood, shoulders heaving, blood running down one arm. He looked at what was left, two broken brothers, a wrecked trail, a wounded past. And Mahmoud, steady as the earth. He didn't kill them. That wasn't his way. He left them a mile from the nearest spring, enough water to crawl if they chose to live. He left no note this time, no warning, just silence. As the sun rose, Jeb led Mahmoud out of the canyons, their shapes etched in gold against the cliffs. They didn't look back. And behind them, the Blackroot Canyons held tight to their newest story. Another memory in the rocks, another lesson in dust and time. By the time Jebediah Cross and Mahmoud emerged from the Blackroot Canyons, the sun was a burning eye glaring down on the world, unblinking and without mercy. Wind curled through the gullies, hissing low across the stone, like it was whispering secrets to the bones buried beneath. The pair didn't speak. They didn't need to. The bond between them had been reforged in fire and blood and silence. They followed no trail. Jeb led by feel, by memory, by the pull in his bones that guided him back to the homestead, or what was left of it. Ash clung to the ground like second skin. The olive tree still stood, scorched but upright, guarding Layla's resting place like a sentinel of cracked bark and brittle leaves. Mahmoud stepped forward first, nudging the mound with his heavy snout, breathing in deep. Then he lay beside it, curling his long legs beneath him, as if no time at all had passed. Jeb stood with hands on his hips, staring across the ruined patch of land. No harvest, no walls, no roof. But he'd returned with what mattered. And the land, well, land can be rebuilt. Vengeance had come and gone like a dust storm, quick and sharp. Justice, however, lingered like an old song still echoing off the canyon walls. Word spread, as it always did in pieces. A wounded Goro brother crawled into Sable Bluff 2 days later, dehydrated and wild-eyed, muttering about a ghost with a camel and a sword made of fire. He was near delirious, but the saloon folk listened anyway, because Goros weren't known for fear, and this one had it baked into his bones. The sheriff didn't ride out. He didn't need to. The story was moving faster than any posse could catch. A tale whispered from one cracked porch to the next. That old man Cross had walked the canyons alone, hunted the worst of the Goros through trails even coyotes avoided, and taken back what was his with nothing but grit, steel, and a beast from across the sea. Some said the camel could speak in tongues. Others swore it killed Clay Goro with a single stomp, though Clay wasn't dead, just missing, vanished like smoke through mesquite. A few claimed they'd seen Jeb ride past the bluff on a thunderstorm's edge, eyes glowing, blood on his hands, and not a scratch on his beast. Every version stretched a little further than the last, but the bones of the story held true. And truth, once laced into legend, sticks fast. Children started carving camels into the dust with sticks. Old-timers toasted to the man who brought Cairo to the canyon. Even preachers used it. Stand firm like that foreign beast, and no wickedness shall prosper. Jeb rebuilt slow. He cleared the ash, righted the well, patched the floorboards of the house until the walls could follow. Some days Mahmoud helped, carrying loads on his back, pulling beams into place. Other days he simply stood watch on the hill, eyes cast toward the horizon, as if daring the past to come back and try again. Strangers came, too. Not many. A drifter with an old wound seeking shelter. A widow with 3 children offering to trade eggs for fence posts. One time, a young soldier came just to shake Jeb's hand and say, "My father told me your story when I was a boy. Said you were the last true warrior this land knew." Jeb just nodded. He didn't tell them about Layla, or the Corps, or the fights that never made it into the stories. He didn't speak of the blood soaked into the canyon stone, or the cry Clay Goro made when he realized no one was coming to save him. Some stories didn't need repeating. But one night, around the fire, he did speak to Mahmoud. "You remember when she said this land don't need more horses? That it needed something that could outweigh the sun?" Mahmoud blinked slow, then shifted his weight to lie closer to the flames. The stars above them were sharp and endless. She was right. Damned if she wasn't. Silence followed, not heavy but deep, the kind that holds 2 lives between it. The years wore on, as they always do. Rain came and went. Harvests failed and flourished. The house grew stronger than before. The olive tree bore fruit at last, small, bitter, and beautiful. Jeb's hair silvered, his steps slowed. But every morning, he walked the perimeter of the land with Mahmoud at his side. Every evening, he lit the lantern by the door, in case someone came with a story, or a warning, or both. And far beyond the farm, in towns and taverns, the legend deepened, not just of the farmer, or the camel, or the revenge taken, but of the bond between man and beast, of a man who had once walked through foreign wars, buried the only woman who understood him, and still stood tall enough to make the wicked tremble. They called him the Keeper of the Sand, the Last Rider, and sometimes simply Jeb of the Canyons. They never quite agreed where the camel came from, or what became of the Goros. Some said the brothers fled to Mexico. Others claimed one became a preacher in Arkansas, forever mumbling about hooves and blood. But one part remained constant in every telling, that when a man builds something true and has it taken from him, the land will answer. And when that man walks with quiet fury and a beast too proud to kneel, the world listens. And so the tale endures, passed down from fire to fire, mouth to mouth, sharpened at the edges, sure, but the heart of it stayed the same. An old man, a foreign beast, and the sand that remembers all.